What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Book Talks. I'm running through content today. I'm just getting through a few books that I recently read. This book was one of them, We Were Liars by Lockhart. This is what it looks like. She has two names. She has Lockhart and Emily Johnson. It's a name she writes her books under, and I think she said it's because it's her grandmother's maiden name, Lockhart. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't remember if this scored well or not. I don't think it scored too hot, but we'll get into it. So Emily Lockhart, not a lot to find about her. She went to school to become a writer. Specifically, her field was in British literature. She came from a father who wrote plays, and together they wrote a book or a novel when she was in the 3rd grade. They wrote maybe 1 or 2. So she's been in the life of writing since she was a very young child. Based on, I can't remember if it was the preface or the acknowledgments of this book, she even said that she was nervous a lot of people would not like the ending of this book. She mentions that she would cry after class if her teacher gave her some not so positive remarks. I think I want to take that into an account. I'm not sure if the author looks up videos, reviews about her products or not, but I will take that into an account. And in her, like I said, I can't remember if it was in the preface or in the acknowledgments whether or not she said that people may not be happy with how the book ended, but she was. So that's all that matters. That's all that matters, is if you as a writer, you put out a product that you enjoy, whether or not the reader enjoys it or not. I'm gonna get into this book. We Were Liars. This is what the cover looks like. 3 people playing or just chilling in the water. And for my first impressions, I didn't know what it was gonna be like. Obviously, it has something to do with water. I honestly can't even remember how I got this book in my library or where I bought this from. Just reading the description, it doesn't fit today what I'm interested in. So I honestly don't even know how this got in my library. But what I think I'm gonna do is put it in one of those reading birdhouse type things for the community. I'm gonna slide it in there because this is a young adult youth book, and I'm past it just a little bit. Depends on which book. Some books I keep, like I have some young adult youth books up here. This is not one that I plan to keep. It's just not for me, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff in the book. So here's a book description. We Are Liars. A beautiful and distinguished family. A beautiful and distinguished family, a private island, a brilliant, damaged girl, a passionate political boy. A group of 4 friends, the liars whose friendship turns destructive. A revolution, an accident, a secret, lies upon lies, the truth, or true love, the truth, read it, and if anyone asks you how it ends, just lie. I'm not sure I want to spoil it. I'm probably going to spoil it. So it's telling you just to lie already about how it ends. I'm not going to lie to you about it. A few themes that I caught on from this book were secrecy, more so than lies. There's a difference between mixing up the truth and just telling a lie versus just omitting information and not saying it at all. There was a lot of secrecy as opposed to lies. There was a lot of manipulation. There was themes of racism, of patriarchy, of privilege, addiction, hatred turning into loves or transformation. I didn't even know a word for that. Hatred turning into love, and innocence. Why I said secrecy more than lies, more so than lies, is I don't recall too many lies being told. People were going around just being like secretive. They weren't saying anything versus actually lying. The main character, Katie, or Cadence is her name, she grows up in a rich family. But there was manipulation all throughout the book. Family tree is the grandpa and grandma at the top. And by the way, the grandparents, they're rich. They have this island. They own an island with a lot of different housing compounds on them that each mother and her kids and her family gets to stay in, and then they all gather at the grandparents' main home. Grandpa and grandma have 3 or 4 daughters. All of those daughters have kids. One of the examples of manipulation is that when the grandma dies, the mothers start arguing a lot more over the will and who's gonna own the properties after the grandfather dies, and he knows it. The grandfather knows they're arguing over his properties, and he kind of manipulates them into arguing with one another. Like, he'll ask one daughter if she can help him remodel this place. He will play on them and their emotions. Racism. There was hints of racism throughout this book. One mother was married to a man and got divorced. Out of that marriage, she had one son. She had two sons. I'm sorry. She has one or two sons. I'm sorry. There's a lot of kids. She gets remarried to an Indian man, and I think they mean Indian as in from India, not Native American. She marries an Indian man, and that man has a nephew, his sister's son. And so he gets to be on this private island with all of these rich people, and he wasn't born into it. So he's seen as an outsider. The grandfather treats him as such. The adults treat him as such. So there are hints of racism being shown throughout this privileged family towards this Indian nephew. There are hints of patriarchy. How I saw this playing out was from two observations. One was how the grandfather was in charge of everything, this whole island, all of the houses, all of the money, all of the trusts. He was in charge of everything, and they treated him as such. They still kissed up to him ruling over the kingdom and all of his people in it. Katie, the main character, Katie is the oldest of the kids. Second to her is Johnny, which is her cousin, and Johnny is there with Gat. Johnny's mom is the one who marries an Indian man who brings along Gat, the Indian nephew. Johnny is the second oldest, but he is a male. Johnny's mom pushes him to be the next heir to everything because he is a man. So all of these parents have their own agendas with the grandfather to push, advertise, or market their child in some way to the grandfather so that they can secure their spot with his money. Katie's mom tells Katie to tell him we love the house, tell him we love this, tell him we love that. Just kiss up to him. And Katie is against that. She doesn't want to do it. There's a lot of competition between these families. So privilege was another theme. Privilege. All of these people, they have rich people problems. Gat being on the outside of this, he mentions once in the story that he took a trip to India and he saw the poor conditions of India, and he didn't think it was right like that rich people like the grandfather could live in these conditions while poor people had to live in those conditions. He could see through the family's issues that he just couldn't relate to. They weren't actually privy to real world problems. Another theme of this was addiction. And this is the parts that I start not to agree with, but at the same time it is normal in like Caucasian families. Because I'm reading another book called The New Jim Crow, and it talks about how Caucasian teenagers are equally as likely, if not more, to do and sell drugs and to end up in the emergency room for overdoses. I guess it's normal to a certain set of people, especially when you come from money. So there's addiction, whether that's addiction to wine, and then Katie herself, she gets into a bad accident while she's on this island, and she has to then take Percocets or something like that to like ease the pain because she has endless migraines after that, and she gets addicted. She does get addicted to the pills. So there's a theme of addiction throughout this book. And then there's the theme of hatred turning into love. And I think there's a hatred between not only the kids and the parents, not the grandparents, but Katie and her cousins. None of them agree with how their mothers are acting about this will. They don't want to kiss up to their grandpa. They hate how they argue. The kids don't even want to be, the teenagers at least, the teenagers don't want to be associated with their parents to the point where they stay on one side of the island and they don't go over for dinner. They just don't want to associate with them. It all comes to a head, and everything that from Katie's perspective of how she thought they all hated their parents turns into love at the end, because it after all was just a misunderstanding. Katie's accident gave her access to a little bit more love and attention. Parents, they weren't paying attention to Katie really and the children's feelings before the accident, or else the accident wouldn't have happened. Towards the end, all of the hatred and the bickering between the aunts and the mothers, it did stop, it did slow down. And Katie got access to the needed love from her mother that she should have. And lastly, there's a theme of innocence. Innocence and innocence being taken away, because we have on this island 4 teens, 4 adolescents. And the 4 teens, their youth is kind of getting stripped away from them. So Gat, which is the Indian boy, his innocence is stripped away from him when he goes to India and he's exposed to the lives that they have to live over there compared to this island that this rich family goes to every single summer. Katie's innocence is stripped away from her after the accident, and she has to recall what happened and what they did. They do something on the island they shouldn't have done in a heat or a fit of passion, and it does go wrong. She doesn't remember the accident that they run into. It's all a daze to her. It strips away their innocence, the teens' innocence, when they have the accident. And the teenagers, all of them, the kids and the adolescents, their innocence is being stripped away by watching their parents argue over property. Here's the rating. So to start off with the rating, the storyline and the ending, and I'm about to spoil it a little bit. So the storyline was pretty infantile. Again, it is a youth book. It is a young adult book, so I understand. But at the same time, with this storyline mentioning addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol, it promotes in a way self-harm because Katie's hurting herself because her parents don't pay attention to her. I think the book is written from the perspective of Katie, like as the narrative trying to remember her time spent on this island for 3 or 4 summers. It's just missing like that it factor, that adventure, I guess. Most of the premise of the book is Katie trying to remember what happened during this accident that nobody wants to tell her about. She doesn't remember what happened to her friends while she's off the island recovering. She doesn't know why they're not writing her back or reading her email. So you only get a glimpse of the adventure towards the end of the book when she finally starts to remember what happened. It only lasts like a chapter or 2, maybe, I want to say. So majority of the story, you're not getting adventure. You're just kind of getting a build-up to this forgotten memory. You're getting a long build-up all the way to the end of the book. And I think I got to like part 3, which is like 90 pages in, and I still didn't understand. I was like, I still don't understand what this big secret is. It's just a build-up of all these characters. I initially, up to that point of the 3rd part, I did not like the book. So when I first did this rating, I gave it a thumbs down for the storyline. After I finished the reading, I gave it a thumbs up. And the only reason I gave it a thumbs up is not because of the entire storyline. The book is kind of written from her perspective, and the last question that it leaves you with is, do you think what Katie recalls actually happened? Because she is suffering from memory loss. So did she just make all of this up, or did it actually happen? So that's the only reason that I flipped my answer and gave this storyline a thumbs up, is because I had to ponder on that a little bit. I had to think a little bit to ask myself, was this all made up? But the actual content of the storyline, I didn't like it, but I still gave it a thumbs up because of that last pondering question. Had it just ended how it ended without that question, I would have gave the storyline a thumbs down. It left me with a little bit of food for thought, so it got a thumbs up. Length and the pace. I gave this a thumbs up just because it was very short. All fiction is easy, it's simple. It has a lot of chapter breaks and part breaks to the book. You could honestly read this book in like a day if you wanted to. Look at these pages. It's like double spaced. Half of the page is used. It's a very quick read. It got a thumbs up for me, length and pace. It's meant for young adults. It's easy. So when it came to complexity, it got a thumbs up for me. This was almost a very simple read. It was almost too easy. I don't even have anything else to say about that. I didn't need to pop a dictionary out. It was simple. It was a very simple read. So thumbs up. They get a thumbs up. Would I read another book by this author? I personally said no. Like I said at the beginning, this was an infantile read, and I don't want to say infantile like children, but like it is a youth book. It's a youth book, like something you read when you're maybe like 12 or 13 or 14. I personally think my interests are past that. Again, I don't even know how this book made it into my library. I think I bought it when I very first picked up reading again. That doesn't mean anyone interested in youth books or teenagers shouldn't read this book, but me personally, I'm almost 30. So this was very young. So I would not read another book by this author. So they get a thumbs down. But I recommend this book to anybody. I gave this a thumbs down mainly because I don't have any tweens in my life. I didn't agree with the message because I just couldn't relate to it, and it also promoted addiction to drinking, self-harm, and drugs. So personally, don't beat me up for it. I said no, I wouldn't even recommend this to a teenager, because I wouldn't want a teenager to get the wrong idea that taking drugs like this and drinking to solve your problems and harming yourself is going to make things okay. You would think rich people have therapists. These people, they don't have anybody. They're not talking to anybody. They're just harboring all of their feelings, and then they take it out on each other. Just got a thumbs down. So out of everything, this book got 3 out of 5 stars. This book got 3 out of 5 stars, which is not bad. It's not bad. It was a youth book. I don't think it was supposed to be life-changing. I couldn't think deep enough to find a moral of this story. I'm not sure if every book has a moral. Just off the top of my head, the closest moral I can think of, it's to value people while they're here. And for kids, maybe it may be to not grow up so fast, because you will miss what you had. The book got 3 out of 5 stars. Not on the recommend list. I'm not stopping anybody from reading it. So this is the passage that I chose to read. This is a fable or a made-up story made by Katie to describe how she felt amongst her other 3 cousins. Once upon a time, there were 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl. When each baby was born, the parents rejoiced, the heavens rejoiced, even the fairies rejoiced. The fairies came to christening parties and gave the babies magical gifts: bounce, effort, and snark, contemplation and enthusiasm, ambition and strong coffee, sugar, curiosity, and rain. And yet there was a witch. There is always a witch. This witch was the same age as the beautiful children, and she and they grew. She was jealous of the girl and jealous of the boys too. They were blessed with all of these fairy gifts the witch had been denied at her own christening. The eldest boy was strong and fast, capable and handsome, though it's true he was exceptionally short. The next boy was studious and open-hearted, though it's true he was an outsider. And the girl was witty, generous, and ethical, though it's true she felt powerless. Which she was none of these things, for her parents had angered the fairies. No gifts were ever bestowed upon her. She was lonely. Her only strength was her dark and ugly magic. She confused being Spartan with being charitable, and gave away her possessions without truly doing good with them. She confused being sick with being brave, and suffered agonies while imagining she merited praise for it. She confused wit with intelligence and made people laugh rather than lightening their hearts or making them think. Her magic was all she had, and she used it to destroy what most admired. She visited each young person in turn on their 10th birthday, but did not harm them outright. The protection of some kind of fairy, lilac fairy perhaps, prevented her from doing so. What she did instead was curse them. "When you are 16, proclaimed the witch in a rage of jealousy. When we are all 16, she told these beautiful children, you shall prick your finger on a spindle. No, you shall strike a match. Yes, you will strike a match and die in its flame." The parents of the beautiful children were frightened of the curse and tried, as people will do, to avoid it. They moved themselves and the children far away to a castle on a windswept island, a castle where there were no matches. There, surely they would be safe. There, surely the witch would never find them. But find them she did. And when they were 15, these beautiful children, just before their 16th birthdays, and when their nervous parents were not yet expecting it, the jealous witch brought her toxic, hateful self into their lives in the shape of a blonde maiden. The maiden befriended the beautiful children. She kissed them and took them on boat rides and bought them fudge and told them stories. Then she gave them a box of matches. The children were entranced, for at nearly 16 they had never seen fire. "Go on, strike," said the witch, smiling. "Fire is beautiful. Nothing bad will happen. Go on, she said, the flames will cleanse your souls. Go on, she said, for you are independent thinkers. Go on, she said, what is this life we had if you do not take action? And they listened. They took the matches from her and they struck them. The witch watched their beauty burn, their bounce, their intelligence, their wit, their open hearts, their charm, their dreams for the future. She watched it all disappear in smoke. Why I chose that passage to read was because it gave some background as to how Katie felt about herself and her cousins. She thought her cousins and Gat, technically the Indian boy wasn't family, but she included him in the story anyway. And she describes them all as having these awesome witty talents, and she's just this wicked witch who can't do anything right. And that's because her parents cursed her. So she's very distraught over, Katie is very distraught over her mom and her dad separating pretty much. And the mother didn't handle the breakup in front of her child as well as she should have. I think Katie blamed herself for what happened in the book, the accident. It did involve a fire. And she puts it all on herself, although it turns out from her imagination that it was a group decision because they were all just kind of tired of their moms arguing over nothing, over the properties and dollar signs. So I think that in itself is how a lot of teenagers feel, very emotional. And they are very upset at their parents for what their parents did or didn't do for them. And this goes for anybody. I'm not even just talking about the book. When you act out of emotion or fury, it almost never ends up how you wanted it to or how you thought it would. I don't think that it should take everything Katie went through to kind of get the admiration and love from her family that she got at the end. But it is what it is. And like I said, one of the themes in this book was innocence and how it was stripped away. And that story was kind of Katie's perspective on how she played a hand in stripping not only her innocence away because of her parents, but how she spread this disease to her cousins who were perfectly okay before she came in with her own problems. I'm not saying the writing was bad from the author. She has awesome writing skills. It's just the content for me at my big age. I'm not into it. The last little conversation of the day would probably be my favorite character. And I'm gonna say it was Gat, which is the Indian boy. And that's because he was my favorite character because he was an outsider and I personally felt like I could relate to him. You feel like you're in a world where you almost don't belong. You do, but other people are making you feel like you don't belong. And so I personally connected with Gat and how he was feeling. He was the most down-to-earth character who didn't have monetary issues and privilege as they did. I also felt sympathy for Katie. It took a lot of trauma for her to finally get love from her family. Yeah, I felt sympathy for her, but my favorite character was Gat. I still couldn't relate to Katie because she was rich, privileged, and they even told her cousins, Johnny and Gat and them, that you're kind of crying over nothing. Nobody's problems are bigger than anybody else's. We all just have different problems. So this book got 3 out of 5 stars, and I appreciate the author for writing. It takes a lot to write a story and try to please. You can't please everybody. It was very neutral. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. So that was it for me. Once again, the book is We Were Liars by Lockhart, and that's it. Thanks for stopping by Book Talk, and hopefully I get to read some more books. We'll see you guys on my next video. Bye, YouTube.